Good morning, everybody, and welcome back onto the NFL podcast. I apologize if it's been a little bit of a stretch since I last came on. So, anyways, today we're going to discuss the playoff picture. Yes, it is week 8, and some teams are getting ready to play, are going to be halfway done, believe it or not. And the season only started 7 weeks ago, but that's the nature of the NFL. It's a short season. It's only 17 weeks long, so varying at the end of the day. Some teams have 10 games left to play. Others have 9. And by the end of the day, many teams will already be halfway done with the season. So, looking at the current playoff picture, and like I said, it's going to change in the next coming weeks. This is not final, but here's kind of a mid-season report. So, leaders of the AFC North and the number 1 seed, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, listen, Steelers have played very well the past couple weeks. They have beaten the Chiefs. So beating the Chiefs in Kansas City and then beat the Bengals last week in Pittsburgh, and right now playing at the 4-3 Lions. And then looking at their schedule along the way, they have the Titans. The question is it the Titans that you saw them play against the Colts? Or is it the Titans that you saw last week against the Browns, where they look very mediocre at best, won by 3 points in overtime, just a game of field goals to be exact. So how do we see the Steelers playing out? Look, I think their defense is solid, not great, but solid. And here's a key tiebreaker: they're 5-2, but so are the Patriots. So when you look at that, they are playing in week 15. So that game, depending on how each team plays, maybe they win every game. They're each 11-2 going into that. Winner gets the first round bye. But then we have the Chiefs that are 5-2. And by the way, the Steelers obviously will own that tiebreaker. And look, Roethlisberger a few weeks ago against the Jaguars, he just looked awful, threw 5 interceptions. That's how they lost one of their games of the year. And since then, he has looked better. You know, they've really gone old school. They've given Le'Veon Bell the ball, running plays, 30-plus times each game. And that seems to be working, so they're just moving the ball down the field. They're running a huge amount. They just have the right pieces, and they're heavy favorites to win the division. The Ravens, they trail them by 1.5 games so far. The Ravens, they're 4-4, have been very inconsistent this year. Their defense at times has looked great. Offense, I don't know. We don't know how long they'll be without Joe Flacco. So looking at that division, the Bengals, they're now 2-4. If they want to have any chance to stay with the Steelers, they lost. So it could be safe to say that rivalry, in terms of the two teams being competitive against one another, is pretty much over at this point. Listen, the Bengals start out 0-3. And sure, they've won 2 out of their past 3 games, but that doesn't matter at that point. They're 2-4. That division race is pretty much over unless the Ravens can play good football in the next coming weeks, playing the Titans next. Packers, of course, without Aaron Rodgers, but it's always tough to play. The Texans, Lions. So we'll see. Titans, Packers, that's the next 4. Maybe if they win, I think they have to win a lot of them to really stay with the Steelers. May have to win 3 or 4 of those games while in the same stretch. Lions, Colts, Titans. They actually have 5 games, not 4. So listen, Steelers, they're favorites in the West. Well, the Chiefs are 5-2 right now. They're the 2 seed if the season ended today, so they would either play the Patriots, or if the Jaguars were to win, like I said, this is as of right now. It's really going to change. It's probably not going to remain this way. Maybe the Bills or Titans. So, looking at that, Kareem Hunt is going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. You know, the Chiefs do have a solid defense, not as good as it quite been in the past, but still solid. And looking at that, the Chiefs 5-2. You know, Alex Smith really been transformed this year. Looking at their schedule, Broncos, who have lost 3 in a row. Listen, they have no offense. It's in Kansas City. They should be favorites to win that. At Dallas, at the Giants, originally could have been considered very tough. Now, Cowboys is certainly winnable. Giants, they should win that one. You're playing at the Jets. These are just an example of some of the schedules. You're playing the Ravens again. So looking at that, the Chiefs, they're currently heavy favorites to win the division. And listen, if they would have beaten the Raiders, they would have been 6-1. And the Raiders would have been 2-5. That would have been a 4-game gap right there. That division could have been all but over. But the Chiefs, or the Raiders, they're still in it. They're 2 games behind them. And if they win the next game, they own the tiebreaker over them. So the Chiefs, heavy favorites to win the West. That division race is pretty much over. And currently the 3 seed, the Patriots. Listen, the Patriots started out 2-0, have won 3 straight, including beating the Falcons in their last game. So looking at that, they're 5-2, and their defense really looked terrible the first 2 games. It's gotten better since then, and listen, the Patriots are 4-2 or 5-2, and that game coming up against the Patriots or against the Steelers in Week 15, that's going to be a critical game, obviously, for both teams. And when you look at that matchup, that's going to be critical down the road. Yeah, the Patriots, I'm not as concerned about them as what I was, say, in Week 1 and certainly after Week 4. And they're going to lose 3 or 4 games this year. Could lose to the Steelers. Keep an eye out at the Bills. So, 5-2 Patriots, they're still a playoff team. We'll see. So, next up, the South leader right now is currently the Titans, 4-3, but the Jaguars are also 4-3, and the Titans currently own the tiebreaker since they beat them back in Week 2. And listen, here's a question about the Titans. Are they that team that scored 36 against the Colts, scored 30 plus against the Jaguars back in Week 2? Or are they the team that they played against the Browns? They are still showing inconsistency. They've maybe not taken the step that we would have expected them to take. So they're playing the Ravens next, Bengals, Steelers, Colts, Texans, Cardinals, Niners, Rams, Jaguars to close out the year. So they have some easy games. Listen, they can win 10 games this year. I mean, we'll see. Maybe they're not the team that we expect them to be. So that division race is far from over. The Jaguars are still in it. Obviously, the Texans, they've already had a bye week, so we'll see how that goes. And currently, the 5 seed are the Bills. They've been surprisingly good this year. It's been their defense. That is their biggest strength. They've managed to win some games that maybe you wouldn't have thought they would. And listen, if they would have Tyrod Taylor didn't miss that throw that would have won the game against the Panthers, they could be 4-2 or 5-1 and leading the division potentially. So the Bills, keep an eye out on them breaking their playoff drought. And the Jaguars, 4-3, great defense. So many names up there. Telvin Smith just got a contract extension, 4 years, $44 million. He's going to be on that team for a while. They seem to really be great at rushing the passer. You know, I think they've gotten 10 sacks now multiple times this year. So great at rushing the passer. Very good defense. Fournette has shown flashes already. This is the best Jaguars team in 10 years, maybe, in a very long time. So that's the picture right now in the AFC. Currently contenders, Dolphins, lost 40-0 to the Ravens. They've looked quite bad at times. The Broncos, they look very good. You know, their defense is quite good, but the problem is they don't have much offense. Trevor Siemian has really looked lost the past few games, past 3 games. They're currently 3-3, playing the Chiefs tomorrow night. Again, the Ravens, inconsistent. We don't know how long Flacco's going to be out. By the way, that hit, certainly illegal. Wouldn't be surprised if Kiko Alonso suspended at this point. Texans, Deshaun Watson starting to show really good signs. Huge test for him this week at Seattle. That's going to be a huge test. So, looking at that, the Jets surprisingly 3-4. The Raiders currently 3-4 right now. Listen, Carr got hurt. They lost some games. They lost to the Redskins. That was a bad loss. I predicted them to start 3-0. And that crazy Thursday night game last week, listen, they caught a huge break. And in that game, what I observed is all what could have happened. The Chiefs should have won. People will say that. The Raiders should have won. That game could have gone either way. And the Raiders were very close to being 2-5. I repeat, very close to being 2-5. Yet they were able to win that one. A win is a win. Doesn't matter, but if they're 2-5, they have no chance of winning the division and the wild card. Trying to get into the wild card race, they'd be 2 games out. The Jaguars 4-3, Dolphins 4-3. So they caught a break. They're only 1 game out. We'll see what happens there. So AFC, let's just wrap it up one more time. The North, it's pretty much over at this point. The Steelers are heavy favorites. If the Ravens can play well during that stretch, and if they can beat the Steelers in Week 14, that could be interesting. As long as they play well, play just as well as the Steelers, if not better, then we'll see. Or that division could be over, but Steelers heavy favorites. The West, the Chiefs could have all but ended it. They very easily could have been 6-1. If a few more things could have gone their way against the Steelers, they could be 7-0. That division is mostly over, but not quite. We'll see how well the Raiders play during that current stretch as well. And also, by the way, their matchup is going to be in Week 14, so we'll see how each team lines up. And by the way, if the Raiders are able to win the second game, then tie-breaking scenarios could get quite interesting. So, right now the Chiefs are the favorites, but just a division to keep an eye out. Patriots, they're 5-2 right now. They are heavy favorites. The Bills just aren't as talented enough. I mean, we'll see, but I doubt it. The Jets, they're just lucky. At this point, look, Patriots are heavy favorites. They're going to win that division. Now, could they host a wild card game? Looking at the Steelers and the Chiefs, it's not completely out of question yet. And again, the Chiefs own that tiebreaker by beating them in the very first game of the year. So we don't know yet. It's hard to say, but listen, the Patriots heavily favored. First round buys for the first time in years is in question. Titans, that division, the Titans need to play better, especially on offense. Going down the stretch, they have some very hard games. The Ravens potentially. At Pittsburgh. They're scheduled to play the Rams, a much better version of the Rams. And the Texans once again got blown out by them in Week 4, something like 55-14. So, listen, that division race is far from over. The Jaguars, they are tied. Right now, they currently own the tiebreaker, so playing the Jaguars a second time, last game of the year, that could be the game that decides who's in the playoffs, who's not, or who wins the division, who doesn't. So, listen, that's going to be a very interesting race. The Texans right in it as well. So South, probably the most undecided division. Wild card spots, you have the Bills and Jaguars, Ravens, Broncos, Texans. That's far from over. We really don't know there. We'll keep an eye on that in the coming weeks. So the NFC, Eagles, 6-1, lead everybody by a game. Look, the Eagles, they're heavy favorites to win the division. We don't know about the Cowboys. We don't know about the Redskins. By the way, they've swept the Redskins already, so currently 3-3, they're 6-1. Currently 2.5 games up on them. Plus, basically 3 now, counting. If they catch them, they're clearly going to own the tiebreaker if it ever even needs to come down to that. Listen, Wentz, strong MVP candidate. They have a good balance of running. No one wide receiver is really dominating for them. They each all show flashes, all make plays. Aguilar looks so much better this year than he did in years past. He seems to be making plays, and look, no one, they're spreading the ball around. Zach Ertz is probably their best receiver right now. Their tight end, and their defense looks pretty good. Listen, the Eagles, they could be Super Bowl favorites. They really could be Super Bowl favorites at this point. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were. So that division, we'll talk about that in a minute, but to right now, it seems pretty much over. Games, Niners this week, that's a win. Broncos at Dallas. Now, while they're clearly heavy favorites, they may be 8-1 at that point. That could be somewhat interesting. At Seahawks, that could be tough. Like I said, they played at there last year, and they're a much better team than they were at that point. So we'll see. They have some tough games. Broncos defense, that's definitely a threat. In Dallas, maybe. At Seattle, maybe. At LA Rams, maybe. Raiders, Cowboys. So we'll see. That could be tough, or maybe it's not that tough at all. But listen, they're going to win the division. AFC North. So here's a crazy thing that happened. The Packers were 4-1. And the Vikings were 3-2. The Vikings have won 2 in a row, and the Packers have lost 2 in a row. So what we were thinking is 4-1 Packers. Aaron Rodgers is playing. Yes, it's in Minnesota. Rodgers gets hurt. So then you bring in Brett Hundley. He's looked terrible this year. They look lost. They lost to the Saints of all teams. And then the Vikings have won 2 in a row. So looking at their schedule, they'll play each other in week 16. It's very rare it'll be a Saturday. The 23rd will be the Sunday night game of the week. And it's in Green Bay. And they currently 5-2, 4-3, have a 1-game lead on them. So looking at that game could be very interesting. By the way, the Vikings currently have the tiebreaker if they were to be tied by winning that game. And Aaron Rodgers, I've heard, will not throw until December. So listen, within a span of 2 weeks, the Packers went from being heavy favorites to win the division to then now I don't even know if they can even make it to the playoffs. And if they do without Aaron Rodgers, they're an easy out. So Packers, they're currently off this week. They will play the Lions. At Chicago, they'll play the Ravens. At Pittsburgh, at Cleveland, at Carolina. That, by the way, that's an easy win. The Vikings again closing the season against the Lions. Well, the Vikings will play at Cleveland. That's an easy win. In Washington versus the LA Rams. At Detroit, at Atlanta. At Carolina, the Bengals, the Packers, and the Bears. So, looking at it, I'd say that the Packers are more... I'd say the Vikings are favorite. Definitely at this point, we don't know when Bradford's coming out, but they have managed to win without Delvin Cook, without Sam Bradford. Their offense is not at full strength. Even Stephon Diggs missed a game. Missed 2, actually. So, looking at that, their offense has never been at full strength this year. But once again, as their defense, they are currently favorites to win the North. So, the West, the LA Rams, 5-2. Goff looks rejuvenated. Gurley looks better than ever. I credit Sean McVay, 30 years old. He seems to really know offense very well again. He worked with Cousins in Washington the past couple of years. He freed up the offense, made it usable for those guys, and look, it is really working right now. So next up, we will have the New Orleans Saints, 0-2. their defense looks much better. It really does. Marshawn Lattimore is a rookie. His Pro Football Focus grade right now is 94. As good as any cornerback. Big part, for years, the past 3 years, the problem was defense. They had no defense. They put up crazy numbers on offense, but they just couldn't get by on the defense, and it's significantly better. Seems like they have a good balanced running attack with Kamara and Ingram, each getting carries. And look, by the way, the best pass rusher, Cameron Jordan's grade right now is 93, so defense looks much better. The Saints right now look like favorites to win the division. Current wild cards, Seahawks and Packers. And look, the Seahawks, last week, they look like, they won 24-7. And it was 10-7 into the fourth quarter. And looking at that game, their defense looked about as good as they did all year long. It was just dominant. Since the Giants last week, terrible line, no running. Beckham, Marshall out for the year. Shepard was out that game, and I don't know when he'll come back. And you had none of your 3 best receivers. You didn't really have a running back. Okay, maybe the running's halfway decent. But you did not have any offensive playmakers. And you had a 36-year-old quarterback with no mobility and a terrible line. And the Seahawks just dominated. It wasn't even close. The score said 24-7. But looking at that game, watching that game, the score could have been 45-0. And the only reason why the Giants scored is the Seahawks had a turnover, a fumble that was run back into the red zone. They could have won 45-0. The Seahawks just dominated the Giants. They just made too many offensive mistakes. They had, Wilson missed a deep ball that would have been an easy touchdown. Turned out they had to punt. Then they had a couple goal line stands. They couldn't score from inside the 2 a few times. That's 3 points you should have right there. And maybe that turnover doesn't happen. But, listen. That was a beatdown. Could have been one of the worst losses in Giants history. And so looking at that, let's go through the divisions. East, the Eagles are heavy favorites to win. Currently right now, the Cowboys, Ezekiel Elliott, and listen, I think he is playing today, but suspensions could be hailed down any week. So let's say he gets suspended after this week. Their games are versus the Chiefs, at Falcons, at Eagles, versus the Chargers, Redskins, at Giants. So Elliott, if and when the suspension happens, it could happen any week now. And it could potentially take them late into the year without their running back. Now, originally, if he was suspended, would have come back today. But now, they're 3-3. They're clearly not as good as they were last year. If Elliott gets suspended, they could be without him deep into the regular season, and he's their best offensive playmaker. He showed it last week against the Niners, so this is a big question coming. They're 2.5 games behind the Eagles, and they're playing them, 8, 9, 10, 11, week 11. It's in Dallas. Oh yeah, and they're playing them to close the year. So, that division's pretty much over with. But if the Cowboys can beat the Eagles, and the Eagles start to stumble a little bit, they might win the division. That could get interesting. But until now, they look nowhere near as good as the Eagles. Nowhere near as good as the Eagles. The Redskins, again, Cousins looks good at times. They look like they're quite a good team right now. They're currently playing the Cowboys this week, which they're each 3-3. So one team, they're going to gain a game on each. They're going to gain a game on each other. And whoever wins that will currently be in better playoff position. Another one, clearly a setback. So we'll see with that. In the Giants, listen, they're 1-6. I talked about them earlier. No offense. Line's terrible. No receiving. Running. Supposed to be one of their biggest weakness coming in. Maybe it's a little better than it was last year, but it doesn't matter at this point. They're 1-6. The rest of their schedule, they're playing the Rams at San Francisco. Maybe they can win that. The Chiefs, the Redskins, the Raiders, the Eagles once again. Playing the Cowboys again. Look, they might win 4 games this year, but it really doesn't matter at this point. It really doesn't matter. So that division race is pretty much over. Keep an eye out on the Cowboys. But it's going to go to the Eagles. The North, again, going in 2 weeks ago, the Packers looked like heavy favorites to win the division. And then Rodgers gets hurt. The Vikings win 2 in a row. Packers lose 2 games in a row. Keep in mind that the Vikings own the tiebreaker. And when Rodgers comes back, so they say he's going to throw in December. So looking at that, won't throw for another 5 weeks. And that's just throwing. So then you talk about the other rehab process and stuff like that. Their last 4 games, at Browns, at Panthers, versus the Vikings, at Detroit. So if you can get Rodgers back, maybe for that Cleveland game, plays the last 4 games, he can get them back into the playoffs. It happened in 2013. He got hurt. They were mediocre without him. Came back, played 1 game, dominated that game, had a great game, got them into the playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see, but highly unlikely. And listen, as a 6th seed, if they can stay into the playoff race, again, they're 4-3. So remember last year, 4-6. So their next 3 games, Lions at Bears versus Ravens. They could fall to 4-6 once again, which that would be a 5-game losing streak. And listen, the past 3 years, they've had moments where they don't look like a very good team, and they look like the best team in the NFC. And look, the window is clicking. Year by year, keeps going by. And the big question is, will the Packers win another Super Bowl? This might not be the year. They currently have a huge setback right now. And other teams, the Lions. Listen, the Lions, 3-3. And they were 3-0 playing the Atlanta Falcons. And the Falcons are currently 3-3. So the Falcons have lost 3 straight. We'll get to them in a minute. But looking at that, they had an opportunity to go 4-0. And they were about 1 yard away from doing that. They lost that game. And they've lost their last 2 games. Terrible loss to the Saints. And they lost before to the Panthers, and they really had to. So that's 3 losses in a row. So Falcons, Saints, Panthers. So they've lost to 3 NFC South teams in a row. So look, the Lions are in trouble. They really are in trouble right now. They're playing the Steelers this week at Green Bay, which is without Aaron Rodgers, which if it was with Rodgers, I'd be really concerned at this point. They could free fall out of control. Okay? The Lions, at times they look like they're quite a good team. Last year they're 9-4, potential first round bye. They blew the division to the Packers last year. It was in Detroit. Went 1 and done to the Seahawks. Never really had a chance to beat them. So the Lions are currently, they might potentially be free falling. They have to get back on track. And that has to start with tonight. And the Bears, 3-4. They look pretty good at times this year. Trubisky still learning. Not really a threat this year. So the Vikings currently favorites to win the division. It's not over yet. The Lions, can they somehow turn it around? If and when does Aaron Rodgers come back? Those are 2 questions in the division. And can the Lions play like they did once again the first 3 games and when they nearly went 4-0 instead of now being 3-3? And the South. Look. Early on, it looked like it would be the Falcons. They were 3-0. And they lost to the Dolphins. They had a 17-0 lead, and they blew that. And now they're currently 3-3. They're playing at the Jets. You think that's an easy win, but the way the Falcons have been playing and the Jets being mediocre this year, things could change. Things could really change, and they have not shown flashes of being that team of last year. They have not done that at a consistent rate. Ryan has been way down, and that's been their biggest problem. So we'll see if they can turn it around, and Panthers, Cam at times looks good. Times looks halfway between. Is not at MVP level, but it's not as bad as he was last year. They really can't run the ball that well. Stewart doesn't get very far each time he runs. McCaffrey has not figured it out yet. They're not as good as they were 2 years ago. Okay, that was a one-time thing of being a great team. But they were a good team, and they can potentially win this division. They can potentially be a wild card. And the Bucs, very disappointing. They're 2-4. So we'll see how they play. Let's say they win their next 2 games versus the Panthers at New Orleans. They could lose both of them. They could be 2-6. Very disappointing, considering that some people predicted them to make it to the playoffs. I thought they were a playoff team. Some people even predicted them to go to the Super Bowl. So very disappointing Buccaneers team. Listen, so we'll see. So the South, far from over. We don't know. Finally, the West. The Rams, they're quite a good team. They really are. They're playing at the Giants versus the Texans, at the Vikings, Saints, Cardinals, Eagles, Seahawks, at Titans, at Niners. Look, they can really, they can be a good team. They can win 10, 11 games this year. They can potentially win the division. And the Seahawks, again, at times their offenses look terrible. At times they look like a good team. Their last flashes of looking like a great team, let's say they put everything together, they look like they were almost a great team against the Giants. They dominated the Giants. They've had some good wins this year, but they've looked really bad at times, including almost losing to the 49ers in week 2. Okay? They almost lost to the 49ers in week 2, and other games that they've played. They lost to the Titans badly, to a team that just barely beat the Browns. So they started out 1-2. They've won 3 straight, including beating the Rams. So if they can win some more games and beat the Rams again, they can potentially have that tiebreaker over them. So Seahawks, I think, will be a wild card. One of them is going to win the division. One of them is going to be a wild card. The West is 2 teams. So that's pretty much it. Teams that are not in it that could get themselves in. The Falcons, if they have an on-off switch. If the Lions have an on-off switch. The Cowboys. Potentially, when the Packers start to stumble even more, and even Aaron Rodgers can't get them back in it, they could be replaced and taken out by either the Falcons could replace them, the Panthers could, the Cowboys, and the Lions, or the Redskins. A lot of teams in it. So it's hard to say. Nothing's confirmed yet. The South is completely undecided. The West is still not decided, so a lot of question marks. Again, this is going into week 8. So a lot of things can change. This is far from over. I just wanted to point out the current playoff picture, and we'll look at it down the road. And look, we'll see what happens. So, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. And, one thing I want to apologize about is 3 weeks ago I talked about the division series, right? I've not talked about baseball since. So, we'll try it either as soon as the World Series ends, or if we can get one in before. Apologize for not updating it enough. Look, I'll try to speak more about it in the next few days to the next week. So, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.